Welcome to Lead Gen in the Wild. I'm very excited for another great podcast episode. Today we have Konstantinos on with us, and Konstantinos is actually our SEO director at LLG. And today I'm really excited because we're talking about not only SEO, but we're going to also be talking about AI SEO, generative engine optimization, answer engine optimization, all of the terms. We'll get into all of those and kind of untangling of all of the fun acronyms that our industry can't decide what to do with at the current moment. But we're going to talk through all things AI SEO. So yeah, Konstantinos, super excited to have you on. Really excited to talk about this. Yeah, would love to hear from you if you want to do a quick intro about your background as well.
My name is Konstantinos. I'm a marketing consultant. I'm based in Dublin, in Ireland. And we've been working together now for, I think, over 5 years, right? We've done work on many projects, as well as Llama Lead Gen's own SEO and GEO. I think that's an important conversation, like some of the things we wanted to cover today, right? So how SEO is changing, how AI is reshaping the picture when it comes to how, brands build trust with their target audience, and what does this all mean?
Let's dive into it. So I want to start with SEO first, since, that's always been, kind of the primary driver with organic. I guess recently, in the past even few months, the past year, even going back maybe even 2 to 3 years, how is SEO different today than it was, maybe start with a year ago? I'm curious what sort of tactics you've seen, what sort of strategies, what sort of shifting that you've seen in, we'll call it more traditional SEO now.
Well, I think it's a very interesting time. A lot of things are changing, and I think this affects differently, or let's say the effect can be different depending on what kind of business you are, what kind of website you are. In a, let's say, B2B software as a service context, and I'm bringing this up because we do a lot of work with B2B SaaS companies. I think one of the key changes is how brands build trust with their target customers. Up until 1, maybe 2 years ago, a lot of valuable SEO tactics around the bottom of the funnel, right? So how potential buyers and decision makers make a choice, make a purchase decision, that all went through Google, right? So there were certain tactics we're advising people. So for example, hey, make a versus page. So for example, Salesforce versus HubSpot, how to choose which one is right for your business. And then the next step would be to book a demo and so on. I think a lot of these search queries now are being addressed by the AI features that you see, on Google in the first page. So there's a lot of things happening around the mechanics of search, especially around the decision maker stage. At the same time, the same features, we definitely saw them taking away visibility, even when it comes to the top of the funnel. My view is that was perhaps not as valuable traffic, right, compared to the bottom funnel queries. But certainly it's been a lot of things happening very, very fast. I'm happy we could actually adapt to many of these and adjust our SEO process, as well as introduce the GEO offerings that we have now.
Yeah, let's dive into GEO too, because that's I definitely want to chat through more so GEO AI SEO related stuff on this call. So, a lot of people, this is still pretty new to people, even though we've been doing it for not too long, but we've definitely been doing it for a little while at this point. We have, our sea legs at this point. We've done it for a couple of clients. We have some case studies. So we definitely have more of a well-defined process than some others, I would say, at this stage. But let's kind of go back to the very beginning. there's a lot of acronyms in the industry. Can you explain like some of the acronyms? For instance, like we have like LLM visibility, we have GEO, we have AEO, we have AEIO. There's a lot of different terminology, and I know that the industry as a whole, we're not great. We love our acronyms, but we're not great at picking one and choosing one and sticking to it. And so it seems like we're leaning towards kind of the sticking to Geo. So maybe we could start with that one, but would be great to just get like a super high level breakdown of what these acronyms mean and which ones are really going to be most important that companies should key in on.
Yeah, so I think the most important one is the one you mentioned, right? GEO. That's generative engine optimization. And, generative AI has been around now for quite a while, actually, although, ChatGPT and that kind of iteration of the GPT model was really what became super popular. Um, and these are basically generative engines, right? So you ask a question, it generates text. It generates text. That text can include links, can include brand mentions, and now it's everywhere. And actually, it's very valuable for certain things, like all these types of, buyer queries, things that Google wasn't very good traditionally at. I think Google content was very good at top of funnel. You had a page with a lot of curated information there. But when it comes to the bottom of the funnel, things weren't as good. You had this versus page that you had to do a lot of research. And generative AI was very good at compiling information, making super easy for the user, right? I see most of the industry leaning towards GEO. I don't think anyone particularly likes that acronym because of the geo targeting, geolocation aspect of geo. Then of course you have AIO, which would stand for AI optimization, or some people would use LLM optimization. You could also see ChatGPT SEO, right? Some people would just call it that, and I think it drives the point home. I think in most cases we call it GEO nowadays. It's really interesting when you see people booking a call and being interested in that service, how they describe it in the comments or in the information or description box.
It is interesting. I often get, new prospects kind of booking a call with me for Geo or for AI SEO, but they don't actually know what they're necessarily booking the call for. They just know that their company needs to be ranked or needs to be on there. So it's kind of interesting. It's part educational and part, kind of working through and our process and telling them about the workflow a little bit. But yeah, I'd love to also kind of bridge the gap a little bit. Like, what are you seeing? I know you were talking about like Google as primarily being a really good kind of top of funnel driver and, Geo or AI SEO, ChatGPT SEO being a really good bottom of funnel driver. Could you dive deeper into that? And I'd love to also understand some of the, core similarities as well as core differences between, a good Google organic strategy versus a good ChatGPT or LLM optimization organic strategy.
I think the first thing I would touch is perhaps what is a good ChatGPT strategy. Just because I think it's a little bit more defined nowadays than what is a good Google strategy. I have my own thoughts on that. We'll get to that in a second. And it's interesting that we talk about ChatGPT. We don't really talk about what is a good, perplexity strategy or Claude strategy. And I think all of these platforms are valuable. And we certainly have been, in calls with prospects that, came through Perplexity or something like that. However, if you look at, Google Analytics, I think across almost every account, ChatGPT is the biggest source of traffic. And all indications point to ChatGPT being the number one platform when it comes to that type of use, like individual users, let's say consumers, right? So it might be for business use. They're using it for a business recommendation, but it's not, it doesn't run their business in a sense. So ChatGPT, I think, is the number one for that kind of thing. And what is a good strategy there? Well, I think it has to do with how people use ChatGPT, essentially. I know that many people just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, Chat, can you give me 10 recommendations for what are the best companies in that space to work with? So these are the best X for Y types of queries that happen within ChatGPT. And in many, many cases, people will include there a lot of context, right? So my company is, of that size. I have been burnt before. I'm looking for that specific thing. That's my budget. Who would you recommend working with? And there is this paper we've been talking about from the National Bureau of Economic Research that they did in collaboration with OpenAI. And I think it's linked in their blog. It's called How People Use ChatGPT. And what they found is that a lot of uses are not exactly what you would call search-like. So people would ask ChatGPT to compile information, to synthesize, to do all sorts of tasks. And a subset of that usage would be what you could consider an equivalent to Google search queries. But it would be way more nuanced than Google. People somehow subconsciously use Google in a way that it's very keyword focused. In ChatGPT, it's more of an interaction or a dialogue, and you have people typing a lot of details. And what is what ChatGPT is particularly good at is helping people work through their buyer objections, find information that normally would be very difficult to find through Googling. You would need to do a lot of Googling, go to a lot of pages, compile that information yourself. And I think a good ChatGPT strategy, going back to the original question, is a strategy that helps you get visibility across, these types of buyers and these types of searches within the platform.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I want to go back to something you said earlier, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but are you viewing ChatGPT as kind of like the Google in this space? I know there's so many other AI, SEO, LLM software out there, right? Like I know Claude is getting pretty big. I know a lot of people use Gemini, but you're seeing in the space that ChatGPT, simply just owns the lion's share of the market share, kind of similar to like Google and Bing.
I would say in terms of traffic that it sends to websites, that's probably the case in most industries or, industry verticals, because it perhaps depends on, what exactly we're talking to. But from the data I see, I would say that most traffic from LLMs comes primarily from ChatGPT. Now, on the other hand, I'm sure that there's a lot of maybe less, but still very valuable traffic from other LLMs. At the moment, I see ChatGPT more as the barometer, like more like, in your words, the Google of the space, in a sense that if you're optimizing for ChatGPT, I'm sure you're also optimizing for Claude or Perplexity, the same way that if you optimize for Google, you sure in a way optimize for Bing, for example.
Have you seen any use cases, and maybe it's like too early, but I'm really curious. Have you seen any use cases of people potentially using like a Claude for this versus a Perplexity for this versus a ChatGPT for this? I know you mentioned, most people are using ChatGPT probably for both personal and business use, but I'm wondering if you've seen, either in your experience in the data, with our clients, whether there's different use cases for using different LLMs.
I think Claude is very strong for creative tasks. I know people using that, within their business for these types of work. And I'm sure they also use it for the equivalent of Google search, right? But what is interesting is that I know the same people also use ChatGPT. And that might be, anecdotal, but I don't know anyone who uses Google and at the same time they use Bing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of like once you choose one, you kind of stay in your lane. And especially if you're choosing a paid subscription, then you're typically going to use the paid subscription because it has all of your memory. It has everything saved. Um, cool. Yeah, I was just curious. And another thing you touched on, which again, we don't have to dive super deep in, and this is probably a little bit going deeper into our secret sauce a little bit to a certain extent, but I'd love for you to share because I think we have a really well defined and well dialed in process since we've been doing this for several clients at this stage. So walk us through just a super high level of like once we typically onboard a client, what that process typically looks like and how we break it down into the different kind of phased approaches.
I think what is very valuable and the thing that we try to prioritize initially is having a strategy, because then we know exactly what to measure and how to define progress for a GEO project. So one of the first things that we do is we try to develop a prompt library. So these are the equivalent of Google searches that we want to be tracking and optimizing for. But without going into too much detail, we try to do this in a way that it's research-backed and not random, right? So in some cases, that might be counterintuitive, right? Because people want to see how they rank, let's say, how they rank for these, what's the best X for Y types of searches that they intuitively feel that they're valuable for their business. But the framework that we use covers some of that, but also things that correlate to further touch points, right? Further trust building and all of these types of questions that people will ask ChatGPT before actually booking a demo or booking a call for a consultation. That can be summarize the testimonials from that brand, or how does that brand stack up against their competitors. Maybe the competitors are even nameless. Maybe the person who is doing that search didn't even do any research before. So there is a lot of nuance, I think, and a part of the approach is trying to understand that, and I think that's really important, and something that we really try to do really well is to understand the business in depth, and then build from that foundation to create that prompt library and start putting that into tactics.
How do you go from kind of bringing back the core theme of Google, versus ChatGPT, let's call it for simplicity purposes. How do you go from the framework of keyword research to prompt research? I know that prompt research can be more limiting just based on more limiting in a sense that there's with a lot of the tools out there, you pay for a certain number of prompts to search for, and the prompts can run rampant, right? As we know, there's probably 1,000,000+1 ways to search for it, whereas the Google keywords are pretty dialed in. So there might be, only a couple of thousand, maybe tops, depending on the nature of the business. But what's the strategy for how to choose the right prompts?
As you said, ChatGPT prompts can be very dialed in. And that means that we need to account for that. And at the same time, we might need to exclude things that feel pretty generic. The approach is we start with an underlying goal or purpose, which is to understand what are the buyer objections for a specific user action. That can be booking a consultation or booking a demo, and then having some personas in mind. So what we really try to do is measure what's the performance for specific use cases and specific personas. And that can get you a long way. What we also see sometimes is the client coming with a very specific problem or challenge. That can be that a competitor is doing a conquesting campaign, or they have a new product line that they want to launch. And in that case, things that become increasingly important is, does ChatGPT have accurate information about this new product that is coming to market? Or does it evaluate information in a neutral way when it comes to competitive comparisons and things like that?
I want to shift gears a little bit because I know this is something that we personally work on all the time, and it is Reddit in AI SEO. Um, why has Reddit exploded in popularity? Could you talk a little bit about why Reddit is such an important source for ChatGPT and all of the LLMs?
Absolutely. And I think also this connects very well to the previous question because we didn't touch the Google component, what makes a good SEO strategy, right? And I think Reddit is part of that search everywhere framework that Google is now, pushing forward. So, for example, when you Google, anything commercial or even informational, you will see a very curated set of resources on page one. You will see ads, you will see an AI overview with links to very often Reddit sources or user-generated content from YouTube, from Reddit, from Quora. You will see the traditional blue links, right? So traditional SEO alongside maybe embedded video content, Reddit threads. People also ask questions, all the sorts of different properties. And I think there is that push for user-generated content. A lot of conversation on Reddit come across as authentic. And in many cases, people that have first-hand experience with a product or a service, they will share things that you cannot find in a regular review or sponsored content. And I think that's valuable. We certainly saw in the previous years all of these search queries where people would type, what's the best Bluetooth headphones? Reddit. So they would actually try to search for Reddit threads on the topic. And I think on Google, exactly.
It's a different way of prioritization, essentially, right? It's ChatGPT is over prioritizing trust and authority building sources over the tried and true blog posts. And maybe it's, I don't know, the death of the domain rating to a certain extent. Not the death of, but it's becoming less and less important, I guess, would you say?
User-generated information conversations become more and more important because they're more recent and often contain information that you cannot find anywhere else. There's a net information gain in many cases. And I think especially LLMs like to have the kind of fresh information around certain topics. Now, when it comes to sources, I see usually a mix of websites and user-generated sources referenced by ChatGPT. But I think it also depends a lot on the topic. There are certain topics that both Google and ChatGPT think that you need that first-person view and information, and Reddit is a really good source for that. I also know, and you know as well, that Reddit has made these very exclusive deals with both OpenAI and Google, right, for access to their content. So I think now it's more of a solidified partnership, and probably we'll be seeing more of that in the future.
It's definitely becoming more and more important, and yeah, we've definitely seen that with our clients is pairing, Reddit and Reddit marketing and geo marketing in their service plans. Speaking of service plans, like let's say, walk me through, we have a lot of clients who are just starting geo projects with us. Again, this is brand new. They haven't done this before. There's no defined process like we have for SEO or other digital marketing tactics. And I know you went into a little bit of the prompt library and you went into a little bit about, dispelling some misinformation, but what are, the first 3 to 4 things that we typically do once we onboard a client for geo projects? And I think that would be helpful for our viewers to get a sense of, what is the step 2 beyond geo? Once, yes, we know that it's a need, we know that we need to affect our geo positively. we know what the goal is. We want to rank, right, on ChatGPT and all of these LLMs. But tactically, without getting too deep into the tactics, what are kind of the high level, next 3 to 4, 3 to 5 steps?
So as I mentioned before, the first step would be to set up our measuring infrastructure so we can, start tracking progress. The second thing would be to work with the client to identify what are those things that are important for the business right now and become a priority to work on when it comes to their ChatGPT presence, for example, or their SEO presence, or everything together as part of a holistic strategy. Then the obvious next step becomes what are the sources of influence? How does ChatGPT determine how to prioritize brands when you're asking for a recommendation? And what are those things that you can apply some leverage to and try to improve? Maybe there is some information missing on the website that doesn't help with this kind of like competitive comparisons. Or maybe the information is not structured in a way that it's easy for ChatGPT to process. And I think it's important to remember here that this is a very new technology, and by no means ChatGPT crawlers are up to the task in the way same that Google's are. Google is really good at understanding pretty much anything you throw at them. I'd like to put an asterisk there, of course, because but they're much better than ChatGPT crawlers at that. So that's definitely a key thing of any geo project, and then of course translating that into actionable tactics. We also know that ChatGPT searches a lot. Google thinks quite a lot, right? So if you ask for, hey, what's the best, B2B marketing agency for this and this and that, they will definitely do a bunch of search queries trying to retrieve information and compile it. So this is also how everything connects with a good SEO strategy and how everything...
That lends itself to a good point, like, because this is all so new. Can you talk to me about going a little bit deeper into like reporting and metrics? How have we been typically benchmarking ourselves or benchmarking these services when everything is kind of in a state of flux right now? There's a lot of moving pieces, and we're not exactly sure, what is definitive, what isn't definitive. Talk to me a little bit more about, some of the tools that we use, some of the metrics that we surface, what's important in the realm of geo.
And I will actually start with a challenge here. Just want to say that probably for many of the listeners, attribution has been, becoming more and more difficult over the course of the past years, right? I remember these conversations from, when Apple changed, cookies in Safari, or, all the things with enhanced conversions, and all of these things that's been happening, multi-device user journeys, and so on and so forth. And especially in SEO, very often it was very difficult to have proper attribution. Maybe someone Googles something on their phone, checks it out, from their computer when they're back in the office. It's super difficult to attribute these kinds of user journeys. And I think this carries over to GEO, right? Now, the way that I see the industry as a whole, moving right now, and when it comes to geo tracking and attribution, there are two things. The first is, let's say there are two things that we can measure or really measure. The first is, what's the traffic that comes from ChatGPT to our website, and what happens? What are the interactions that happen? Do we have any add to baskets? Do we have any booked demos? Do we have any scheduled appointments? Or, any lead magnet downloads or any blog article, visits and things like that. The second thing is, ChatGPT prompt tracking, right? So, for example, when we try to evaluate, are we recommended by the platform when there is, a certain set of queries or parameters. Do we rank high? So, for example, I ask ChatGPT, what's the best marketing platform? It's going to give me 3 recommendations. If I was working for, HubSpot, I would be asking, am I number one? What's the sentiment? What's the tone? And I think so. This is definitely things that we measure, and we try to connect to traffic, and we try to present the whole picture. But I think what many people miss around GEO is the qualitative aspect of it. So, for example, is the information accurate? If there was a new product launch, does the AI platform really understand the features and how they stack up against the competition? And of course, this is even more important if we're talking about a service, that there's way more subtle qualities, perhaps, than a software product.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because, we've seen like zero click marketing, for instance. We've seen like traffic go down in Google. I'm wondering like how, as we're kind of like in this state of upheaval, so to say, how have you seen, or how have you explained it to clients of, even though we're getting less traffic, our influence and I don't want to say engagement, but our influence and our visibility might be growing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think marketing is becoming more about meeting the buyer at the stage that they're in and the place that they're in terms of platform. For example, when you Google, something, in many cases, you will have an AI overview. You will have a YouTube video. You will have, the 10 blue links. You will have a few different. You will have a curation of a few different opportunities to present your brand. Then it becomes a question of, are we in that video pack? If there are ads, do we have an ad for that? If there, search results, are we in the search results? Are we everywhere there? And if someone goes one step further in ChatGPT and asks a certain set of questions, are we presented in a favorable way and in an accurate way? And I think there is inherent business value in that that might not be able to capture or track right now. And I think a lot of these subtle qualities might not be, too new to some people that were used to doing, for example, local SEO, right? For example, if you have your business profile information accurate, your opening hours, if you're, operating in a brick and mortar environment, all of that is super important, super relevant. You will never be able to really track, if somebody called you from that or walk into your photo studio or something. But I think in most cases, we're becoming better and better at attributing things. And I think in our dashboards, you can clearly see, for example, hey, there is a visibility trend that we can actually track and attribute when it comes to specific use cases and user personas that are finding us through ChatGPT. And the same, of course, comes when to Google rankings. You can see your Google AI overview presence, your organic SEO. So there's a lot of reporting infrastructure behind this.
Yeah, and I think all of that is kind of evolving too, as we start to get into benchmarks and solidifying what metrics matter, what are more vanity metrics, assisted conversions, stuff like that, to kind of help marketers and senior marketers really have a clear, defined model of success, so they can ladder that up to their leadership team. Or even just themselves, helpful to internalize it.
Just to add, for executives at the CMO level, the way that they approach a lot of things is, by asking the question, is that a bushfire? Is this something that can, potentially indicate a problem with something, right? So that's a huge thing. And how can, you support the, C-suite leadership team effectively, do their job better? And like a lot of these people are actually looking at the data in such a way of, preventing future challenges, making sure that the business runs well. And of course, every team has their quantifiable metrics and goals to try to achieve. But I think that's one part of the reporting that we don't talk very often. Nobody talks very often, but you can hear it many times in client conversations when they try to understand what a metric really means. And behind that, I think in many cases is it something I need to pay attention to as a CMO? Is that going to become a problem for me maybe, in a quarter or two? And I think that's an important conversation to have as well there.
It is really interesting because some of the clients that have come to us, it's almost a little bit mixture of like PR in a sense as well, where there's a reputational risk management type of issue that maybe their product was bad mouthed or they have trolls, right? Like on certain platforms and stuff like that. But then there's also the rankability aspect that you get with traditional SEO, kind of obviously that's a major core benefit of geo. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different use cases why a company would be interested in geo, and there's a lot of different kind of goal paths, if you will, to kind of get there. So I want to end with a client example, something tangible. It can be anything really that you want to share about, maybe a recent client of ours, a past client of ours, in the realm of geo, any learnings, surprises, tactical, kind of strategic things. Yeah, would love to hear a little bit about, maybe how that went and, yeah, if you have any sage advice to offer from some of our learnings there.
Well, that would be one of the recent projects where they've been launching new products, a certain product that were really keen. They were super excited. The team was super excited about launching that product. And they wanted to make sure that it's presented in an accurate way. And in that particular industry, specifically, there's just so much misinformation or disinformation. I suppose there are many enthusiasts that maybe not have all the latest research and science-backed facts. And I very much, found valuable the way that we adapted in terms of the reporting. So, for example, we adjusted the prompts we were tracking, just made sure that we can actually support that product launch and the concerns around that, and shifted very fast the tracking apparatus to just make sure that we can, quantify, what's a valuable conversation, fetch data from LLMs and from real user conversations to evaluate, what's the sentiment, what's the tone, and what's the accuracy of information. I think that's super valuable to many people, and I expect it will become even more valuable because I think geo is way more dynamic than traditional SEO. And again, Google did a great job and continues to do a great job. Things are very stable. I think with LLMs, it's way more dynamic as an environment, at least right now.
And I guess that's a good kind of closing as well. Where do you see, AI driven discovery heading in the next year, 6 months? Things can change so quickly, even in like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Let's talk about, maybe the next 6 months and then maybe the next year.
I think it really depends on how fast you think the industry will move as a whole, right? We know that they're trying to push agentic browsers and AI, right? That will do things for you. I certainly know that there are many, CMOs or CEOs that go to ChatGPT and they ask ChatGPT, "Hey, recommend 10 companies I should book meetings with. I need help with, this and this and that." I'm expecting that AI agents, maybe within even the next 6 months, for people that are very tech savvy, would be able to actually do that end to end, right? You would just ask your AI, book me a bunch of meetings, and then we will have more and more of that.
Maybe even a step further where they're the virtual assistant. They can take the meetings for you. That's another 6 months.
Yes, I'm actually seeing people offering that as a service. to, let's say, cohort-based programs where you get 24/7 access to their assistant and you only get like a weekly one-on-one. So we see a lot of things like that more in the services sector. So that's definitely becoming a thing. But for, let's say, for a B2B SaaS type of client, definitely agentic demo bookings that will certainly become a thing within the next 6 months to 1 year. When it comes to professional services, I also expect the same. Actually, demo bookings and Calendly consultations, I see the same search behavior across B2Bs in that regard. And I'm not sure if I would like to make a projection from, further than a year or two, really. In some cases, we think technology will move faster than it does. In other cases, not. But maybe one closing remark is that SEO and GEO, so search engine optimization, either generative or more traditional. And again, Google uses a lot of AI in all of their systems, right? The way that it is, what we call traditional SEO is really AI enabled. I think it's just becoming more and more challenging for marketing executives to grasp certain things around attribution, but also to execute certain tactics. It becomes more of a specialized thing. And that's certainly a thing that I've been seeing in the last few years developing very fast. And now with with AI, it's becoming even more competitive, even faster.
Awesome. I am conscious of time. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Konstantinos, this was a great conversation. I'm sure we could probably even do a part 2 or a part 3 of this and probably get into more agentic stuff and more on the metric side and more on the funnel side of things. But yeah, this was a super helpful conversation. I know our listeners will definitely find some good nuggets in here. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Adam. Really enjoyed this and absolutely happy to do a part 2 anytime.